Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Canadian Podcast. My name's Andrew Campbell, and as always, joining me from the beautiful province of British Columbia is the great Sarah Sash. How's it going, Sarah, out west?
Great, lovely.
That's lovely, actually lovely.
No, it is really beautiful today. It's actually supposed to be 35, I think, but I try not to rub those sorts of things in.
Yeah, it's not that here. Which actually, you know what, I should have expected because we have been doing this for several years now, which is very exciting. And it's always opposite. Whatever it's doing here, if we are dry, you are wet. If we are dry, you are. Like, it's always the opposite. It is drizzly and cold today. So, of course, you're sunny and 35.
Yeah, in fairness, though, our corn has been, like, hiding under the ground. We got it in, and then it was just like, I think I'll just grow down. Like, it really was not nice.
So 35
out,
is new for you then.
Yeah, it's going to be hopping now. So.
Well, you know what? And we did have the same problem that in our area, lots of corn has been in because it hasn't been really wet, but it's just been cold and damp. So it's kind of nice to hopefully know that spring, summer, warm weather is coming. Although, what we're actually going to talk today is about something that's pretty cool, Sarah.
Well, we're busy talking about weather and about land because those are all the things that super matter to us. And here at the podcast, we really do believe in sustainability of all those things as a key part of a healthy dairy industry. So today we're going to look at a pilot project to test an on-farm greenhouse gas emissions calculator, which was unveiled in January by Dairy Farmers of Canada and the provincial dairy associations, which is called the Cool Farm Tool.
The Cool Farm Tool it is, and it's designed to help measure a farm's carbon footprint, provide farmers with data, and help them customize environmental plans and, honestly, increase some efficiencies.
Many Canadian dairy farmers want to measure their carbon footprints to learn how they can take practical individual actions towards making their farms more sustainable businesses.
So this is a pilot project. It's aimed at determining whether this specific calculator called the Cool Farm Tool is good enough to provide accurate measurements within the Canadian dairy landscape, paint an accurate picture of our sector's sustainability, assess its ease of use, and see what improvements can be made so that we can actually deliver on some of those things that we're promising Canadians.
Coming up next on the Canadian Podcast.
So we've got two guests today on the podcast. The first one grew up on a dairy farm in Middle Musquodoboit in Nova Scotia. He studied at the Nova Scotia Agricultural College. He's worked for the PEI Department of Agriculture and Land before deciding to work full-time on the farm. Today, he is part of the next generation operating the Port Hill Milking Company, established by Ron and Erwin Maynard and their families in 1992. Josh Dillman, welcome to the Canadian Podcast.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. It's great to be here, and I'm a regular listener, so I'm going to have to listen to myself when this airs and see how I did.
Oh, long time listener, first time caller. Welcome.
You can stay. Also joining us today is Janet Harrop. She's co-owner of Harcroft Acres, a dairy farm outside of Fergus, Ontario. Janice is also past president of the Wellington Federation of Agriculture, treasurer at the Centre of the Wellington Chamber of Commerce, and is also a registered nurse working in the critical care unit at the Guelph Hospital. A whole bunch of jobs. We were talking in the notes before about her having enough jobs, and I agree. Janet, welcome to the Canadian Podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, I am also a listener and very happy to be here. Thanks.
Well, it really is great to have both of you. Janet, the first question I really do have is, I appreciate you taking the time to spend with us, because how would you possibly have time to do all this as well as a pilot project we're going to talk about in a minute?
Yeah, well, in the past with all the jobs, there was lots of days I didn't sleep a lot, that's for sure. But I've always really enjoyed nursing and farming. Had to kind of make that choice way back and went the one route. And it allowed me enough of a flexible schedule that I was able to do both for many, many years, and love being part of being involved in the community and feel really strongly that farmers should be part of the solution, not the problem. So the process, procedure, assessment skills, and that in critical nursing really translates well over to our farm. And we just say that if the farm don't write stuff down, I'm on their case, and we don't have to call the vet often because I do a lot of that stuff. So it works really well.
Yeah, we love the flexibility and diversity of dairy farming, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a bit more about Harcroft Acres itself? How long have you been at it? What's the operation like?
Yeah, so we're at the fourth and fifth generation on this site, and I grew up on a dairy farm myself. So we milk about 120, 125 cows in a parlor system, and like Andrew, we are in the process of transitioning to robotics hopefully this fall. So we're about half an hour from Guelph, so we're pretty fortunate. University of Guelph and all that work is so close by us. We mainly grow just crops for our animals: alfalfa, corn, wheat, soybeans on a rotation. Work with my husband's son and daughter-in-law, and have roots all the way back to England and Holland. So hence, I know it's radio, but hence my blonde hair, blue eyes. So they come naturally.
So then, Josh, maybe you can tell us a little bit about your farm, Port Hill Milking Company. What's it look like there in PEI? How many cows do you have?
Yes, we similar to Janet, we milk in a parlor setup. We milk 150 cows twice a day. We grow all of our own replacements, and we try to grow most of the feed that we need. So we grow alfalfa, barley, and corn. Depending on the land situation, we have grown a little bit of soybeans here and there, but it's not a focus. So it's about 800 acres in total that we manage, and as you indicated in the intro, there's two families on our operation. My father-in-law farmed with his cousin, so we're as you said, with the next generation. So I farm here with them as well as Irwin's son Andrew. So there's four of us that take an active management role in the business, and obviously us younger guys are starting to do more and more, and it's all the problems are starting to be our problems. So
One of those things that it's exciting to take over the farm, but wait, I have to do this all now? One of the fun parts. Well, one of the things that both of you is that in Canada right now there's 40 farms that are taking part in the Cool Farm Tool pilot project. You two are two of those farms, and it's interesting, and I'm really glad to have you two here for the kind of the two different perspectives. Janet, I want to start with you. Why did you decide you wanted to take part in this pilot project in the first place?
Well, first of all, DFO asked if I would be interested. and then they said, well, if you're interested, would you be the Ontario advisor? And I'm like, oh, okay, well, let's start in the first part. But yeah, no, why I was interested. I've been certified in nutrient management for our farm for a number of years, and really have used that of balancing our nutrients. So, and they've expanded that tool to be able to that you can do scenarios and see how your greenhouse gases are impacted. So I'm a bit of a data geek, and so pulling the animal and human health together, melting them together, and so it's just common sense to me. So having foundationally healthy soils, clean air, and healthy people, the Cool Farm tool is just another tool that we can use on our farm for making decisions.
Then, Josh, kind of similar lines, I'd love to know why you got part of it, whether you were also asked by PEI dairy farmers. But I want to go even a step further with you, Josh, to just talk about like the sustainability component. Is this something that has always interested you, or because you're doing it now, it's kind of a new interest for you?
No, I think it's always been an issue. It's always been an interest for me. I think as dairy farmers, sustainability is something that we think about a lot, right? We work in a business where, as your intro or Janet had talked about, we take pride in how many generations have been on or currently on a business. So I think when we talk about trying to be successful and sustainable, obviously, we work in a business that the environment, the soil, the water, the air is incredibly important and crucial to what we do. So that piece of it, I think, just comes natural with being a dairy farmer, and obviously having the desire that hopefully one day one of my three kids will will want to do that, or I present them the opportunity they can do that. So I'm very similar to what Janet said. I'm a measurable person. I like to be able to know measurables, and really we've talked about greenhouse gas emissions around the industry for a while, and when the opportunity was presented to know what that number actually may be, even though I'm still learning what that means, then I had an interest in going through with the exercise.
Well, measurement is such an important part of this and something that we really talk about as farmers and as leadership in the industry. I'm curious, Janet, circling back to the data geek component, which we do love, I must say. How did you usually track your farm's environmental impact previously, especially in terms of greenhouse gas emissions? Was there a formal system in place where you were keeping track of this more formally? Or was it more based on intuition, best practices, continuous improvement, that sort of thing? How were you tracking?
So we would, of course, informally track. Like we're always recognizing the importance of healthy soil, and knowing that healthy soil sequesters more carbon and is better for the environment. And recycling and reducing. There's an economic benefit, so we always look at that side as well. So we've always tried to be as sustainable as we can be, because there's a not only an environmental benefit but an economic benefit. So but this tool and moving towards the net zero DFC target, it was how do we know where we are today? So this was kind of a starting point, and we thought we were doing an okay job, but when you were able to kind of put all of this information into the tool, and it would show you what the results are. We aside from our nutrient management software that I can do some scenarios around different times of applying nutrients and that type of thing, it didn't really have a specific sustainable program. Just kind of looking at what I knew were best practices and trying to adopt as many of them as we could.
Then, Josh, I'm kind of curious from me not being in the pilot project, not really knowing what I would be responsible for. Maybe you can kind of walk me through. You're working with a certified advisor through this pilot. What types of things are they asking you to do? What types of information are you sharing with it?
Everything, it felt like. When you got the list, it was a little bit daunting, but actually it wasn't really that bad. You're talking about your production data as well as your inventory, your land management practices and your nutrient management and that kind of thing. Luckily for us, we record a lot of that information already. I'm married to our nutrient management planner, so that was pretty convenient to gather that information pretty quickly. So. And actually working with the advisor, I found I was probably more anxious about it than I needed to be, because when I got into our initial meeting, having conversations about what we're doing, really I just kind of had to talk about what we're doing. Like I didn't have to get bogged down on too many details. They just want to know, what tractors do you use, what equipment do you use, and a lot of that is kind of information we take for granted that's in our brain. And really it was more or less just sitting down and talking about our operation and then, extracting some data from your online dairy portal and some other tools that we use. So.
That's always nice when you walk into a new farm project and it's unexpectedly easy or pleasant. So I'm curious, the Cool Farm tool sounds pretty cool, of course, but also pretty technical based on what you're saying. Janet, I'm curious how easy or difficult it was to get started using it on the farm, and if there was a learning curve. I know from looking at some of the details that you're actually an advisor of the program now, so you must have got up to speed pretty quickly. Can you tell us more about that?
So the advisor piece, Cool Farm 2 will have regular training sessions. So we all took part in a training session. Interesting, she was in Spain, the person that was doing the training, which to me was rather exotic. But anyways, you could do that from anywhere. I think The tool itself is fairly intuitive. It asks different questions around, as Josh mentioned, your different practices, your cropping, your animals, all the things that you do on your farm. So it's just a matter of of brain dumping all that information from the producer into the tool. And I think as farmers we do a pretty good job of a lot of this work, but we're not always great at writing it down. So this is also an opportunity to kind of talk about some of the practices and, like, minimal till versus full till versus no till, and what the differences are. And it kind of, so the learning curve was to kind of pull all that information together. And the tool was developed more in the food industry. So some of the pieces when you put livestock and cropping and that complexity of layers added some questions that, we had to kind of reach out a few times, and how would you handle this? And how would you handle that? But they've been pretty receptive, and they have like a knowledge base of frequent questions and that kind of thing to be able to ask some questions. And Shelley and I, who's Josh's advisor, her and I have been chatting back and forth a fair bit around some different scenarios. So it's kind of created another little network, which is good.
So then, Josh, if you could, based on you've got all this stuff inputted now, some of that data or feedback, or even just that process of going through, and you're kind of surprised with some of the data that you enter in, whatever that is. Can you give me an idea of, has there been a specific change you've been interested in making now, or at the very least, what kind of opportunity for improved efficiency have you found from using the tool?
Yeah, looking at the data, it kind of highlighted some of that there's some opportunities in the cropping side of our business. Well, there's opportunities in all aspects of our business. We can always get better, but it really highlighted some of the things in our cropping side, and I think that's been something we've been picking away at. Like, I think we all know that checklists of practices that we can try. And last year was the first year, for instance, that we did do some cover cropping. We were lucky enough; we got our corn off early enough. We put a cover crop in after all of our corn. We converted to conservation tillage or residue tillage a couple of years ago. So, just looking at those things and trying to understand what they mean, and then looking at the data to try to see, okay, well, we're starting to slowly incorporate some of these practices, and now we know where we are as we go back to measurables. So what is there for practices that now maybe would work in our business? We could try to see if we can get that number any lower, or what other impacts they could have.
So then, Janet, I'm curious, kind of same question to you in terms of some of that data that's spitting back out. And I'd be interested, just because you are an advisor, so seeing and talking with even more, where do you see some opportunities for improved efficiencies?
Yeah, it was really quite interesting because, of course, I get to see the results of all the farms that I've done, not just ours, right? And of course, we're all pretty competitive with our neighbors. So when you get the results, it's kind of like, ooh, where do we sit, right? And we were sort of in the middle, so I'm okay with that. But out of interest, we're also doing a Living Labs project on our farm, and one of it showing is around nitrogen use. And the Cool Farm tool, it has the ability to measure nitrogen efficiency, and our numbers on our farm were pretty high. And so then some of the numbers that we've been doing in this other research is showing we could back off on our nitrogen application. So that alone is huge learning for us and huge economics for us. So I think that again, the adoption of different cropping practices, like Josh said, and it really strengthens using organic amendments from your own farm. And I think we, as dairy farmers, we've always put that starter fertilizer on. We have these nutrients on our farm. Do we really need to do that? So those types of things, it really kind of makes you stop and think about some of the practices you do. And some of them do make sense, but some of them we maybe don't have to do.
Interesting. And we talked a little bit already about the user friendliness. I mean, on the farm, it's hard to take on something new. I love that there's an advisor involved, but I'm curious for you if you felt like it was pretty easy, if other farmers would be comfortable adopting this and doing this work, if you'd really be able to recommend it to your peers at this point, or if there's some refinement yet to make this so that it's accessible to all types of farms.
Yeah, I do know that Cool Farm is doing an update that they were hoping to release in June that has more feed data and manure application data. Their dictionaries are pretty, there's not a lot of detail for Canada. So being able to add that would be very helpful. But I would definitely recommend it, because we hear a lot of producers in Ontario say, like, how do I know how to improve my greenhouse gas and be carbon neutral if I don't know where I am today from a measurement tool? It is a time drain, and we as producers, with all the different programs and that, do spend more and more time in our office. So I always get a bit of pushback from that, because it does take some time to pull all this information together, and most have this information. Some of the farms, I had to talk to the cropping person, I had to talk to the livestock person, and so it does take a bit of time to pull all the information together. But I think the information you get out and being able to benchmark yourself is hugely important.
How about for your operation, Josh? Was it easy? You haven't become an advisor, so I'm just curious.
Yeah, the process up to this point was I'm going to be completely honest. Time has not permitted me to really review in detail my results. I do have them, and I'm working with Shelley to be able to organize a Zoom meeting to kind of delve into them in more detail, so I can have a little better understanding of what I'm looking at. I really do enjoy how they're presented. The report that was sent to me was very clear, very easy to read and understand. So then I would just like a little bit more information on some of the results, and I need to kind of pick my brain and remember and go over some things about our meetings. But yeah, no, I to this point, it's definitely been it hasn't been too challenging.
All right, that's a great answer. So right after the break, we'll dig deeper into the Cool Farm tool. Stay right there.
As Canadian dairy farmers, we follow ProAction, Dairy Farmers of Canada's national quality assurance program with 6 modules. Modules like milk quality. That stands for high standards of milk production. Or food safety, producing milk that meets 42 requirements. And animal care. That means caring for every cow. ProAction sets standards of excellence. That's what's behind the Blue Cow logo. Dairy Farmers of Canada.
Welcome back to the Canadian Podcast with our guest, Josh Dillman of the Port Hill Milking Company and Janet Harrop of Harcroft Acres. So, what surprised you most about your farm's carbon footprint? Were there areas that could have performed better or worse than you expected, or that did perform better or worse? Did the thing you thought was going to be awesome actually turn out to be terrible? Tell me the highlights.
Well, I was surprised with our cropping. I'll be honest. Like, looking at it, and it's, I think for dairy farming, we do a really good job. We want to know how many kilos of milk we're producing, and butter fat and protein and all that stuff in the barn. Like, we're so hyper focused on that. Well, how many pounds of feed the cows are eating, all this stuff. When it comes to greenhouse gas emissions, it's not a tangible thing that we can grab onto. So when we were looking at the cropping side of it, I was very interested to see our results, because to me it was all new. I had no benchmark in my brain. I had no way to, like I said, I'm a measurable person. I didn't have a gauge in my mind where we should be. So then it was interesting to see we are, I feel, doing what is normal or recommended to do agronomically around our business. So then it was like, okay, well, what does that mean for our greenhouse gas emissions, and where does that put us? And then what does it mean for the business if we then tried to use less amendments, for instance, let's say, what's the cropping impact? What's the financial impact? What's the environmental impact? Like obviously we try to balance all these things. So then, I think I was surprised with the number, not because it was high, but just because I had an interest in knowing what it was.
Because Janet, as Josh kind of talks about, those areas, he mentioned the word business a couple of times, and that's always one for me when I'm trying to think through this sustainability piece. That it absolutely, I fit the same profile that I think all of us fit in terms of, there's a legacy here. We were fortunate enough to have generations before us work hard at being a sustainable operation, so we can continue to grow things on it, and we want to do the same for future generations. The catch is we have to pay for it. And for me, it's one of those things that I always, it makes a really easy case if it can do both, if it can be really sustainable environmentally and there can be cost savings to it. I'm kind of curious from your perspective in the conversations that you're having with other producers as well as on your farm as well, where does that fit for them in terms of increasing efficiencies, reducing emissions, and just being more cost competitive all at the same time?
Yeah, well, I have a range of different producers from Fleckvie, I always pronounce it wrong, cross animals to Jerseys to Holsteins, from tie stall to freestall. So different types of systems and breeds of animals. And I think the cost savings and the efficiencies really come in, future decision making. There's one, he's looking at building a barn. So, particularly with some of the manure storage, because that's a huge piece of the greenhouse gas emissions. Maybe he may change the type of manure storage. He may consider aeration. Like, there's different things that he might consider to be able to help reduce his greenhouse gas emissions that, as you're building it, you can incorporate those into the planning. And I think, the short-term cost savings would be, again, if you can, agronomically balance your nutrients and look at reducing, even trying reducing based on the Cool Farm tool, say your nitrogen 10%, and see, because the tool is saying, your efficiency number is high, and so maybe consider that and put 10% on less next year and see what your yield does. Or, there's also a feed efficiency component in the tool that will talk about quality of feed based on kilograms of dry matter intake versus kilograms of milk produced. And so again, if your numbers are within the norm, you're like, okay, I'm doing a good job. If they're really high or really low, then you can look at and understanding why and kind of go, okay, again, another tool that I can make decisions and maybe be feeding something that is more beneficial to the animal and potentially less cost.
And going back to you, Josh, how has this experience changed the way you think about sustainability in your day-to-day, just as you're going about your work since participating?
Because it's so recent in my mind with going over some of this stuff not that long ago, and we're in the middle of cropping now, we're planting corn today. It makes you look at what you're doing just different because you're thinking about that. Whereas before, we always talked about nutrient management. We always talked about some of these other things that there was a real focus on. So your mind is in a different place when you're thinking about some of these practices. Now, when this is introduced to you, then you start to think, okay, well, how does what I'm doing impact that? And then now that we're lucky enough to be one of the 40 farms to have some measurables, and as we go through the natural part of running an operation and maybe changing small things or looking at changing small things, then that can be a lens that we can now incorporate into maybe some of that decision making.
That's pretty great to hear, I think. We've talked a bit about the accessibility of the program and how that all works. What do you think is the biggest barrier for farmers in adopting more GHG tools like this, and how could we address that? Is this a time thing? Is it a cost thing, an awareness thing? We'll go with you, Josh, first. What do you think?
Well, we're dairy farmers, so we're always going to say it's time. Uh, but yeah, it's just finding the time, honestly, and it's it was great to meet with an advisor in I'll call it the normal busy season. So it was in not cropping or harvesting, but I think that's the priority is that I think you need to find the time. And being said that, like I don't know if it was 5 hours that I put into it, right, on my side of it. Like I had to collect some data, I had to put the time aside to have a meeting, I had to do, but we're not talking days worth of time or weeks worth of time. Like it was finding bits and pieces of time to prepare for the meeting, finding an afternoon or part of an afternoon to sit down with the advisor. So I think it's just really uh, taking a deep breath and finding that time.
Has that been your observation too, Janet, that it's pretty accessible?
Yeah, it's very accessible. I mean, to do an individual assessment for a farm, the tool is free. If you do a number of if you do a number of farms, then there's a cost. But for an individual farmer, the cost of the tool is free. And when I kind of started I did our own farm obviously first, and then I thought, okay, my experience, how would this be best suited for the other producers? So I kind of developed a as non as non-stressful input Excel spreadsheet as possible, so that it wasn't so overwhelming. Broke it out into the cows and crops, and then I had them complete that in their own time, and then I met with them, because it's a lot of questions to ask and pull information that you often have to look up, right? That helped, because if you look at the tool initially and you go through it all, it can be a little overwhelming, because you're like, there's a lot of questions. But if you pull it apart into the different chunks, it's not that. It's pretty easy, pretty straightforward to do, and I think that's how I would do it again. And then they provide me with that information, and then I could just reach out to clarify points. So then it wasn't this huge time drain all at once. They could work on it when they had time, and then I met with them, and I'm still needing to meet with them with the final versions of their reports. So I think doing it that way, it's not quite so overwhelming, and you can, if you have an hour here or there in an evening, you can work away at it. And but I think we always have to look at the end goal. Like that's what we do in business, right? What is the end goal? And getting this information as another tool in your management kit of tools is hugely valuable.
And when you talk about that end goal, I think one of the really important ones, Janet, is the fact that we want to show as dairy farmers that we are really committed to the environment for all Canadians, that we want that Blue Cow logo to mean something to Canadians. So I guess I'm kind of curious, if you get to speak to all Canadians, what's kind of your message about what dairy farmers are doing to be, more sustainable? What do you want them to know?
Well, yeah, I have a passion for healthy soil and greenhouse gas and animal health, as I said. And we do hear a lot in the media that our poor cows are somewhat villainized as being the cause of all the, majority of the greenhouse gas emissions and all of this. And I think the whole understanding of that carbon cycling and how we're natural recyclers. Like we developed these circular economies for food and reuse long before it was kind of a kind of a hip kind of thing to do and say. So I think, we as dairy farmers, we want to show the public and our consumers that we're very sustainable and responsible to our animals, our animal health, our workers, the soil, and we're making a highly nutritious food, and we're doing it in a sustainable way. So I think, again, this is just another tool that we can show that we are doing our due diligence, and what we're producing on our farms is quite sustainable.
Last word to you, Josh. What's the message you want Canadians to hear, to know, when it comes to dairy farmers and our passion for sustainability?
I think that we take it seriously, and that We're people that live in the community, in our local communities, and we want them to be healthy and thriving, like everybody else. When we go to the rink or wherever you may go, community festivals or whatever it is, right? We want people to look at our businesses and our operations and think of it in a positive manner, right? All for all the reasons Janet has said about production and of a healthy product for them and their families. And I think that the other thing I'd mention is that it's not all about the big projects. Like, I know we're very good at seeing biodigesters and things around the countryside or across the nation that are things that can reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but every farmer is doing something that fits their operation, how big and how small, and that has an impact as well. And if they, we always say it, but if they have questions, ask us. We don't mind telling our story. We don't mind telling you what we're doing. In a lot of cases, we're more than happy or proud to talk to you about our operations and what we're doing to try to build forward and be sustainable.
It certainly is one that I'm looking very much forward to hearing more about, how this pilot project does roll out and what excitement can be for the rest of us producers, because I think you're right, Josh, in terms of, it's not about one big thing or not about a couple of really big things. It's about doing a lot of little things right and a lot of little things better. So, Janet, Josh, really, really appreciate you taking some time today to kind of walk us through the pilot project and get us excited for the Cool Farm Tool project.
Wow, a couple of pretty fine examples of Canadian dairy farmers right there. I am impressed. And also regular listeners.
Even better, obviously. I just assume all dairy farmers are regular listeners. So
Obviously.
What's your takeaway from that, Sarah?
Well, it sounded pretty convenient, actually. I liked that. I've heard a lot about it, but not a lot of the detail, let's say. So I was pretty keen to hear how supported they were in the process, how positive they viewed the experience, and just look forward to seeing it roll out among more farms and be something that we can all do to have a look at actually measuring what our baseline is. Because I do hear a lot of that. How are we supposed to improve if we don't even know?
Well, and it goes, because that's the same thing for me, is I think that's always the biggest, is I would like to, but I don't know where my biggest impact. I can guess, but maybe it is, maybe it isn't, and then actually have some actionable items behind it, I think are going to be really, really beneficial for, all of us as producers to be able to do. And yeah, you kind of accept that there's probably a little bit more work to go with it, but then once it maybe has that data, what it knows up front, then, okay, I can probably, Josh mentioned, maybe it was 5 hours. I bet you somewhere in there I can find an efficiency that's worth 5 hours of my time. That's my hope.
One can hope.
All right, if you have any comments on this episode, suggestions for new episodes, write to us. We are on Facebook, Blue Sky, and X. You just have to search for the Canadian Podcow. You can also write to us directly at podcast@canadianpodcow.ca. Thank you, Sarah. Thanks to our guests, Josh and Janet.
And of course, thanks to our amazing production team, Bruce Sargent and Carl Belanger. Special thanks, as always, to our sponsor, Dairy Farmers of Canada, for making the podcast possible. And of course, we got to thank you, our listeners, for listening to us and for chatting about things like the Cool Farm Tool. We'll talk to you soon on another episode of the Canadian Podcast.